All right, guys, we are going to talk about week 4 for the online drawing class, and this week we are going to do something called an animal Zentangle project. Now, some of you may be familiar with Zentangle already, some of you maybe not. If you had Intro to Art at Brainerd High School, we do a Zentangle project in there, so you would be familiar with it, but some of you maybe haven't had that, right? So what I'm going to do is just review what we're going to be doing for the week, so you should have your announcement tool, right on the front page. I have everything kind of laid out that we are working on this week. So obviously you're watching this video right now. I have a Zentangle slideshow that I potentially would want you to review, but I might go through that a little bit in this intro. And then I have a set of instructions you can read through. I have some examples, a couple of demo videos to watch. So it's kind of like a lot of materials here to start. And then you're basically just working on this Zentangle project. I'm actually going to give you 2 weeks to do this, because if you do it well, it should be really, really detailed, and it should take you a lot of time. So I'm going to set the due date to October 4th. So basically, we're going to work on this for the next 2 weeks, okay? Now, the other thing with this is pretty much everything we do in this class, we are learning how to draw things, so that's the goal. So you wouldn't be tracing things. But for this project, the goal is doing the Zentangle portion of it, not how to draw an animal. So for this project, if you wanted to print an animal to trace as like an outline, you can do that, and it'll make more sense once I start going through the examples. So the paper that you should be using on this is the large paper. So if you got a kit from me, it's the large white paper. Okay, it's 12 by 18. That's the final paper I want this drawn on. And so if you want to print an animal to put on this, you would need something printed on bigger paper, which I am able to do. So if you want me to print an animal for you to trace, you can just email it to me and I'll print it and you can pick it up in my room. Otherwise, you're free to print at home with your own printer, and maybe like at home, you wouldn't be able to print big enough. You could just print like maybe 2 small animals and put them side by side on your big paper. Or if you're at home and you don't have a kit, you can just do the whole project on a normal size piece of paper if that's what you have at home. And then you also could use the Canvas digital drawing, but I would only use that as a last resort. I prefer that pretty much everything in this class be drawn by hand, okay? So just at any point, if you have questions or need materials, just let me know. Room D141, I have all the materials you need, but if you had a kit, you should have everything you need for this, okay? All right, so let's go into it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into the slideshow really quick just to go over a few things with you, just in case you're completely new to Zentangle, just to explain what this is. So this is really about line. It's about line and pattern. So in your art kit, you should have some thin Sharpies. I may have given you a thick Sharpie too. I prefer you don't use the thick Sharpie on this. When you're doing Zentangle, you want to think many small thin lines. You want to avoid big chunks of black. You want to avoid thick lines, because what makes them look good is the texture, right? So if you even look at some of these abstract ones here, and they look very complex and they look difficult to draw, but it's really not that bad. You're just focused on a pattern and you keep repeating patterns and kind of putting patterns next to each other. And individually, each pattern isn't that hard to draw. It's that overwhelming amount of lines and patterns you do. So where the skill that really comes into Zentangle is that you're doing a lot of texture, a lot of pattern, a lot of small line. I cannot stress that enough. The most common mistake that kids make on their Zentangles is they're not being detailed enough. Think as many small intricate lines as you possibly can put into these, right? So once again, it's really all about line, pattern, having different values, and a lot of repetition. And the way that value comes through on Zentangle is you're going to have some areas that are lighter and some that are darker, and it's really just the amount of line. So you want to be thinking on your animal, if there's an area you want to be darker, make sure you're putting a lot of lines in those spots. And then areas that maybe are a little bit lighter, your patterns maybe have a little bit less lines in them so that it looks like it has a lighter value. So I do recommend that you're maybe practicing some of your patterns and stuff on the side before you actually put it on your final animal, okay? And just when you're thinking about line, think of all the different line types that are out there, a lot of different patterns you can do, right? So within this slideshow, which you guys have access to, I do have some examples of some patterns on here. Okay, I've got a few there, I've got a few here. But if you go online and just look up Zentangle patterns, you're going to find all kinds of ideas, and you can invent your own, right? There isn't really a wrong way to design Zentangle, as long as you're making patterns with lines, you are doing Zentangle. Okay, the only, I would say, wrong way to do it is just to not have enough of it. Once again, I'm going to stress a lot of small, intricate lines, right? Okay, so that's kind of the main thing I want to show you from the slideshow, but you can feel free to review that on your own. You'll see that there are like some better examples in here and maybe some not as good ones, but these are just generic Zentangles, okay? What I want to do is kind of talk about what we're doing with this project. So we're going to have a focus to this. So if you did this in Intro to Art, the idea was we just focus on Zentangle, but it could be totally abstract and you could just fill the page. This project, I want us to have a purpose, so this is why we're choosing an animal as a baseline. So I would choose an animal that you can have a silhouette. Could be full body or could be close up, but you want it really large and like really filling up the page. And your background can pretty much stay white, and we're going to Zentangle within the animal, okay? So what you want to start with is just a basic outline sketch of an animal. So just think like really basic outline, like the main shapes. You would want to draw like the eyes, nose, mouth, stuff like that. But you're not drawing any of like the fur details or anything like that, or scales, depending on what type of animal it is. You just want that base outline of it. Then what you need to do is your animal is going to have a lot of white space, and I don't want you to just fill the entire animal with like one pattern, right? So what you need to do is you need to break the animal down into smaller shapes. And what I like to do is I like to use the natural contours of the body or the face and try to figure out where the lines kind of naturally just want to go. So like right here on this bear, you can see that there's like this bridge of the nose where you can see that, you know, the artist kind of bridged out and just made like a shape that kind of looked like a top of a nose. And then the nose, if you look at even your own nose, you can feel it. The bridge of your nose goes naturally right up into your eyebrows. So what they did here was they took a line and had it kind of curve out to where the eyebrows go, right? So think of like the shape of the head or the face or whatever you're drawing on. Think of where the lines would naturally go, and you're just breaking this down into really large shapes. And then you want to try to get the shape smaller and smaller so it's more manageable to work with. Once you break it down into enough shapes, then you can start doing individual Zentangle patterns within it. And animals naturally are symmetrical, so you don't have to feel like you need a new Zentangle pattern in every single shape. You can repeat. So notice here, this area above the eye, they did a bunch of little circles, and we can like zoom in on it here, right? So like you can notice up here a bunch of little circles, and a bunch of little circles here. And also notice how they played into value, where like they made these circles down here darker, see that? And how they slowly made them get lighter as they go up. So thinking about the value in there is really important. Down here, this pattern's very simple next to the eye. It's just a bunch of diagonal lines, but they added more and more lines where they wanted it to be darker. So this is where value can really come into play as well. And something to not get discouraged about is don't worry if your lines are a little crooked or your pattern doesn't look perfect at first. This project isn't about perfection. It's about a lot of line and a lot of texture and a lot of pattern. If you do a lot and it's really detailed, it's going to look good even if your lines aren't perfect, right? Like we can really zoom in here. There are plenty of imperfections. Look at these little circles. Like some of them aren't fully closed. There's little notches coming off of them, right? Like this here's just a little squiggly. Like they're not perfectly round. There's like a little blotch right there. But the viewer isn't going to care. When you sit and zoom out, like they just get the effect of the texture. They get the effect of the value. So if you're being very small and detailed with your lines, you don't have to be near perfect at all. Some of them can outright look bad, but when you zoom out and look at the whole thing, if you have a lot of pattern and texture, that's what makes it look good. Okay, so once again, you can zoom in and you can see all the little imperfections in here. And as you're going through the examples yourself, feel free to really zoom in and you'll see that they don't look perfect by any means, okay? So that's the general idea, and this is a base example of like an animal that you could do. I have a lot of pictures in there. You guys can feel free to do that. So the process, just to repeat what you want to do here, you're going to have your big 12 by 18 paper. In your kit, if you got a kit from me, you should have some like thin, like light brown paper. That's newsprint. That's kind of like your practice paper. Just use that as you need to. So what you want to do first is maybe research and choose an animal. I would find a reference image online and then either freehand it, like draw it yourself by looking at the image, or you can print one off to trace, or you can email it to me and I will print it for you. and then you can come to my room and pick it up. And then, so you either get your animal or you trace it. So you either draw it or trace it onto your big paper, get the main outline, then you break it down into shapes. So take your large white area, break it down into smaller shapes so it's reasonable, and then you fill with Zentangle. But once again, I wouldn't just go in and start making the Zentangle. I would practice and research the designs that you want, think about value, and put it in there. When you have practice and you know what you're going to put in, I would say your initial sketch of the animal and the shape should be in pencil first in case you need to make changes. But once you actually start doing the Zentangle, like, it's a pain to draw it all in pencil and then trace it in pen. So that's why just on the side, maybe practice and know what your pattern is and just go in with pen right away. Because if you're doing this well and you're being really detailed, it's going to take you a while. So I don't want you to have to do it twice. So just get the initial shape of the animal in pencil, get the broken down shapes in pencil, but then the actual details and tangle stuff, just do with the pen right away. Once again, it should be a thin pen or a thin Sharpie. Now, if you're at home, you didn't get a kit from me, even just like a ballpoint pen is fine. Black is preferred, but if you have other colors and want to try other colors, that's fine. A blue pen could be fine. If you have colored Sharpies, like the thin ones, and you want to add color into it, I am open to that. The main thing I'm looking for is just intense pattern and a really interesting animal design. So hopefully that makes sense. Once again, follow through everything on the instructions on there, and then let me know if you guys have questions, all right? And we'll see you guys on the next one.